Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the latest rebooted edition of the Clutch Podcast, where shift happens. I'm your host, Ron Klinger. Excited to have you along for the journey. We're going to have a very crucial conversation today, one that is that shift, that clutch topic around an area that many people are facing today. But before I get to that topic, let me get to our guest, right? With us joined today, I've got an opportunity to get to know Mike Demarest. He is a talent acquisition leader with more than 20 years of experience spanning recruiting operations, talent technology, and global transformation. Most recently, he led talent acquisition process excellence and technology initiatives at Siemens, helping to drive global standards, ATS strategies, process improvement, and talent acquisition technology adoption at an enterprise scale. Mike, welcome to the Clutch Podcast.
Hey, Ron, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. I'll give you a shout out here. I think you're a new person inside my network as of a few months ago, but just want to recognize the energy and enthusiasm that you bring. It's contagious, and you're one of those people in my network that I enjoy talking to every couple of weeks and keeps me motivated. So thanks for having me on the show.
Now, glad to have you, Mike. And again, as we talk about this, ladies and gentlemen, I'm trying to put content on the airwaves that can help anybody win, right? Everything I do is about win-win-win scenarios and as many different angles that we can approach. I've enjoyed the great dialogue. Mike and I are part of the HR professional group where we meet and we discuss what's going on in the market from an employment and employer perspective. And that's what really brings us together today. So the tie that bonds us together is a common experience. We both recently, over the last, we'll call it 12 months plus, give or take, right, have experienced the job market on both sides of the table. And that's what makes this conversation very interesting today, is we both have that. Mike brings a lot of experience also on the other side of the table of being the employer in charge of talent acquisition, in charge of it. You know, and I just want to put the catalyst up there and a 2-second and then get your comment too, right? And when we look at the job market, and really, in my humble opinion, if we look over it, it's been the last 24, 36 months. It's been 2 to 3 years where it has, in my lexicon, been a little bit cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Like it is unlike anything we've ever been before. What's your overall arching perspective, Mike, that listeners can hear? That maybe am I alone? Am I the only one that sees it that way?
Yeah, Ron, I don't think you're alone in talking to a number of people through networking and a number of people who are in the same situation that we find ourselves in. Yeah, I think it's definitely different. It's definitely not the market that we've seen in years past. In conversations you and I had, I appreciate the cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I think you've even used the word broken a few times, and
yes,
we're feeling that way at times. Broken is a bold word and provocative, and anybody that knows me knows I enjoy a good provocative statement. I'd probably use that to get the conversation started in certain rooms. But I think the reality is the market has changed so fast recently. It's changed faster than the candidates have been able to adapt, and it's certainly changed faster than the employers have been able to adapt. So we are seeing a disconnect on both the candidate side and the employer side right now. Today.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And if you're out there and at any professional level, if you spend any time on LinkedIn, and I probably spend more than I should, right? But I'm trying to understand the rules of this new game, trying to understand how do you participate it, or moreover, how do you support others that are going through it, and the diversity and the complexity of how organizations are going down that route directly impacts what happens on that candidate side. So let's jump in first. We've talked about there's two sides of this table, right? Two being on one side of it, from a candidate perspective, and the other side from a hiring organization, from the hiring manager, that hiring entity, what that looks like. But let's jump in first and talk about, briefly half our conversation today about what's it look like on that candidate side, and then we'll flip the coin over and we'll talk about it from the other. So when you look at candidates, and to just kind of set it up on a tee for you, like I've read some crazy horror stories that people share about 4, 5, 6, 7 interviews. I've heard wild and crazy things that to me borderline unethical, and I'm going to go there, about doing a project for an interview and then not getting hired. right? So there's no comp, there's no pay. My HR hat says, "Warning, warning, danger, Will Robinson," right? So it's just it's all over the board. Mike, what do you see? What's your vantage point from that candidate angle? What's your vista?
Yeah.
Because again, I'm reading all of this. I don't know how much is true or how much is not, but there's some grain of salt because it's definitely all over the board.
Yeah, I've heard the horror stories of completing use cases or business cases. I think that may be relevant in a small percentage of jobs.
Yeah,
Fortunately, I haven't had that experience. What I have had though is, the black hole. It's really easy to apply to a lot of positions, and I think we confuse applying to jobs as progress, and
yeah.
those are two separate things. Today, an application is a grain of sand into the beach that is the candidate pool that an
That's
employer
a
is probably
great
looking at.
great analogy. Great analogy because
Yeah, I mean, you can
it's
walk to a
quiet.
beach and pick up a grain of sand, but man, you gotta have something that flashes or catches your eye and drives it down to that point. Otherwise, you're one of hundreds, and those hundreds come in the first day. So, um, it's a unique race that candidates have to navigate. And to your point, I think some of the extra things that are being asked of candidates now seem to be, at least from my own experience, the AI interviews and the AI interaction at some point. And while I'm happy to complete that most of the time, there are companies and jobs that I don't know much about, and if I'm not sure I even want that job, I'm not going to raise my hand and say okay to the 30-45 minute in-depth AI interview, knowing that every candidate is likely doing the same thing. So now it's another grain of sand sitting beside the other grain of sand, right? If I had the opportunity to talk to a recruiter first, maybe answer a few of my basic questions and have a personal touch prior to that, then I might be more open to do that. But I think what we're driving to is what we need is still that personal touch somehow in the process.
Yeah.
Fully appreciate that AI can bring a lot of benefits and a lot of value when applied right, but it needs to be applied at the right time as well. Um, you know, the good news, AI makes applying easy. The bad news is it makes the number of candidates that recruiters see today, staggering number that they now have to sort through. So.
Yeah, and I know we're going to get to that employer perspective, but we both have colleagues in this profession because it's what we both do. We both have been there. We've done that. We've managed the implementation of the applicant tracking systems, or in our language, the ATSs.
Mhm.
We understand workflows. We understand, and again, we both know, and calling this out for the candidates that are listening, yes, there are screening questions to help screen out people that are unqualified. And I've got a colleague who's been in my corner, right, in navigating the world before I decided to throw 10 toes down and consulting and doing the podcast and everything else. Still open for opportunities, but I'm getting my greatest return on me because it's back to your point, it's that human connection. And one of the struggles that winds up happening with some of these applicant pools is 80 to 90% of them don't even meet minimum qualifications because people are, like your point, they're just spraying and praying on the resume applications. So that human connect and that connection to talk to somebody at the same time, it's also a bit rare because they're inundated. They don't have time to make that. So it's we're stuck. I don't want to pull one of 6, 7 kids, these days, but it's kind of what it is. It's a toss up.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. And I know, like you said, we'll get to the employer side on what to potentially do about this and how to maybe position some of these jobs differently so you don't have to get to it. But just thinking about candidates and putting yourself with a little bit of empathy and the number of candidates that are looking for a new job in this new market, I can understand where the frustration comes, and I can fully understand where the spray and pray comes from because there's nothing else. They just want that opportunity to have a view, and the only way to do that now is a volumes game, and that's just not the most efficient.
No. And the one thing I feel compelled in the truest spirit of being helpful and supportive, Mike, I think the other thing that candidates from that job seeker perspective, there's a little bit of guardedness that I'm also going to say you need to have.
Mm-hmm.
Just as there are job postings that may not, and applicants, like the state of AI, the state of what I will call the job market integrity, be
Mm-hmm.
mindful of connecting to certain organizations and people, because there's a lot out there where there's fraudulent job postings. There's less than scrupulous people who are taking advantage of one of the greatest. At the end of the day, every single one of us, and I don't care what's your walk of life, what's your profession, your industry, all of us need meaningful work in our lives. And unfortunately, there are people out there that are taking advantage of that need. And I just feel because we're talking about that job seeker perspective, right? Be mindful of how you engage with direct messages on LinkedIn. Hey, we'd love to review your resume for you. I fell for one and I backed out completely and said, disconnected. This is not what, do not reach out to me. And I've even reported to one instance where in a professional environment, completely false and fake, where I tracked down the actual talent acquisition specialist that was listed, and it wasn't even his email, but it's being spoofed as him. He's like, yeah, I'm aware of it, and we're doing everything we can to clean it up because someone's using that likeness to post for jobs. So that red flag, I just had to put that out there because, again, that makes this job market, look more murky and more challenging, that they're already struggling to try to get that representation and recognition.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, fraud is at an all-time high, and that's just another risk and another challenge that's added to the mix that candidates now have to navigate. So I think your advice on being very specific on who and where you contact and doing that research and due diligence is super important. I used to tell candidates in the old playbook to find a job. I still told them, I said, this is now your job. Treat finding a job as a job, right? Do the research on the companies, reach out to people, really track who you've sent resumes to and follow up if you haven't for a while. And I think now more than ever, the viewpoint of treating that as a job and even more specifically treating it as a business development job,
Mm-hmm.
this is sales.
Yeah.
This is flat out sales. You have leads. You need to manage these leads, keep them warm. That is the best advice I can give someone today in this job market. We used to be able to apply and wait, and if we had the right combination of job titles on our resume, we'd get the call. Well, job titles today are not opening the door into the next job.
Well,
You have to position yourself.
and
So
where does that experience play into it? Because I've seen the struggle with individuals, may have experienced it myself once or twice, where I'm looking like, who's that talking up there, right?
yep.
Where look, you've got plenty of experience, you have the grit, you have the know-how, and the doors still don't open. So what do you say to someone who's out there who's because public, it's not, go look out the number of layoffs that organizations and large, massive layoffs that have taken place even in the last 6 months. How do those people regroup? What if you're going to give that job seeker the greatest tip, what are one or two things that they can do to get back on their feet?
Yeah, exactly. I think, yeah. Sorry, was that a question for me?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's that aspect of how do that experience just is, it's not the only thing that adds value, right?
Yeah.
So I'm piggybacking on your lead, and you're like,
Yeah.
you got to kind of show up and stay connected to people, because at least from my vantage point, the relationship is what matters, right? The
Yeah.
relationship is the aspect that you've got to foster more than the job application process itself.
Yeah. I mean, let's be real. We're also two gray-haired guys sitting here,
Yeah, right. Well,
talking
I
about
got more
this.
light. I try to blonde mine a little bit, Mike.
I think if the equation was only experience, then I don't think we would be needing to talk about this.
Right,
So,
right.
so I think there's a differentiation between experience and positioning and how we bring that value that we created during that experience,
Yep.
and sort of what it matters today. Um, I think we need the clear, compelling stories on not just what we did, but why we did it, how we accomplished it. Those are more important than just the saying, yeah, I did that. Yeah, I put in an ATS system. Well, okay, that's great, but you put in an ATS system that was the first system that was adopted globally, and it needed to comply with 20 different discrete workflows across markets that now used one. And why did you make the decisions that you did when they came to those decision, inflection points? Those are the right kind of stories that you have to talk about, and be ready to explain who you are and what you did in a 2-minute soundbite without the use of a job title.
Yeah, and I think what you hit is what we see a lot more of, and I think this is where that whole point on the rule book has changed, right? Is that it's and there's different acronyms for it. I've seen STAR, I've seen SAR, the short one. What's the situation? You gave your point. What were the
Mhm.
actions that I drove? And then what are the results, right? And that's because unfortunately that's how the world is operating today, and it's also challenging at times for people that may not have quantitative jobs that have a quantitative but you still got to be able to demonstrate impact.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
I heard recently Jensen from NVIDIA made a comment, and I like this, so I'm going to read exactly what he said. He said the purpose of your job and the tasks and tools that you use to do your job are related, but they're not the same. This struck with me because I caught myself talking about the tasks and the tools more than I talked about the purpose and what I was really trying to achieve, and why we were trying to achieve those. And that's a learning that I had to get to here in the last 6 months, that it's no, like we said, it's not what you do, it's why you're doing it is what matters today.
And then and I think that's the struggling part, because if you go historically, your resume, your LinkedIn profile, it read that chronological. I did this, I did this, I did this. And now they know that's great. You did it, but what did it produce? What was the outcome? What was results? And so it's a shift, right? Hence the Klutz podcast, where shift happens, right? It's a shift in mindset that I got to capture. Not only did I do it, what was the impact? What was the result? What was the outcome? So, anything else on the job seeker side of that table, Mike, that you'd like to throw out there before we transition on the other side of the table from an employer perspective?
I think the one. I mean, I think we've got the reposition your mindset into more of a business development proactiveness. We've got the positioning into, the market isn't really asking for what we've done anymore. It's asking for how what we've done matters,
And
of
bring that
course.
to the table. Yep.
Bring that to the table. The other one is, I just want to remind everyone to continue to stay relevant. It's super easy, especially in long careers with an organization, to forget about your network and forget about your own personal growth and personal development. You may have personal development happening within that job, related to that position, but continue the development outside of that job and continue those networks outside. Um, you know, don't wait until you need the network to then tap into it. That network is something that you should always be building and always be staying close to.
100%. And again, I think that's crucial, because speaking from someone who made a bit of a shift, and a lot of people out there making that shift to do fractional work because it's an opportunity, right? Your network is your weight in gold. I just and you need to stay with it through good, through bad, through whatever times that you're riding, because you just never know. Who knows? Transparently sharing, I had somebody refer me into my network a year ago. Someone new referred me into that network to the same person a year later. And now I've got an opportunity for an engagement that comes from that. Could lead to project based work, like, which is what I would also consider, want to share with folks that are out there. Don't hesitate on contract based or temp to hire type work, because I know that organizations are using a lot of that to get people on board. So that's kind of my segue to is, hey, there's a win-win with contract to temp, because you can get work, you can demonstrate, and then the employer has an opportunity to see what you can do beyond just the interview. So with that being said, let's segue into it. We've talked about the candidate side of the table, the job seeker side of the table. What's your perspective on the employer side of the table? What are some things that you see and believe, are some of those challenges, and how we dance forward to get the right people on the bus and the right seat on the bus? Because at the end of the day, that's the job.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I think if you look at the evolution of the TA function over the last 20 years, I mean, I think we've probably seen hundreds of new technologies, 10 or 12 new skill sets that are required from recruiters today that didn't matter years ago, or at least importance has shifted in those significantly. The job and role of a recruiter today is completely different than the role of a recruiter before. And I just don't think we're caught up yet. I think the pace of change has happened so fast that companies haven't had enough time to adjust processes or take a step back and truly transform into a way that resets into a optimal, effective, enhanced function today. It's been, oh, there's a new tool, let's add it. Oh, there's a new legal requirement. Let's just add that into the top. Oh, it makes a variation here. No problem. We'll get to it later. Oh, a new technology, a new tool. Hey, let's throw a new ATS into the mix. That'll fix everything. The technology is not going to fix anything, right? I think fundamentally there's process conversations that need to happen. There's complexity that needs to be stripped out of the process. And I think only until you fix those process problems can you really then optimize for tech. Only then can you really, focus on what those operational triggers are that make a great employee experience or hiring manager experience.
All right, man, music to my continuous improvement ears. I feel very fortunate. And again, like I said, music to my ears, because at the end of the day, it's all about the process, right? And when you make technological decisions and adoptions, I've seen this before, and maybe this is part of the struggle that you've just highlighted is, oh, we'll adopt to the tool. And that doesn't mean that's, and I think there's this, I don't, the only way I know how to articulate it, please forgive me, but it's the only way I know how. It's like, we got to make it sexy. We got to make it jazzy. We got to be hip. We got to do the latest and the greatest. And my personal humble opinion is we're chasing the wrong outcome. That's not what you want it to be. It's at the end of the day, in my humble opinion, some of the basic stuff of mapping your process from post to hire to get someone on board, and then you're onboarding once you, like, what are you actually doing with that candidate, right? It matters. And I think we've lost sight of that candidate experience, in my humble opinion, as an HR, TA, and talent acquisition specialist person as well. I think we've lost sight of that candidate experience in that process of what it impacts on them.
Yeah, just like the technology is not going to fix your hiring problem, it's definitely going to amplify, whatever process already exists. If that process is bad, then it's going to amplify that, or it just won't scale, which I've seen countless times. The candidate experience is rooted in an operational, decision. I think things like how you're going to communicate with the candidate, what you're going to tell them, setting those expectations. I mean, just you could even put this in the job description to say you're going to hear one way or the other on this job within 1 week. That's the SLA we hold our recruiters to review your application. After that, expect a phone call from them or an AI screening questionnaire that'll only take you 5 minutes. After that, you're going to talk to the, put that in a way that I know exactly what's coming the minute I take my effort and say, let's go, right?
Yep.
Then hold to those expectations. If you tell me you're going to call me back next week, call me back next week. Even if no answer is keep waiting another week, I'm happy
100%.
with that,
Yep.
right? Just do what you say you're going to do and set that stuff out. But look, let me ask you a question here, and this is one that I can answer easily. Would you rather land on a company job site and have this beautiful employer brand and marketing career site that's 15 pages deep that explores every corner and videos from employees that are telling their story, or would you rather have a hiring manager give you an answer within 48 hours?
Oh, it's novel concept, man. I mean, I'm going to do my
10
research.
times out of 10, we want the
Yes,
hiring manager to give
I'm.
us an answer in
Yeah,
48 hours.
and I'm going to love all the marketing side of what it means for that employer and that employee experience with that organization. But at the end of the day, and again, I love that you led into communication, and that's where we've had past dialogue as well. That's if you improve your communication up front, you're going to, in my humble opinion, what's the date the job was posted? When do you anticipate closed? Like, oh, well, we don't want to be locked in because, well, don't lock yourself in, but until filled in parentheses, you cover it. But even those things would help your candidates understand what's going on. Don't get me started on posting salary bands, right? Because I think that should be, because who wants, Mike, I don't know about you, but I've looked at it and I've applied for jobs over the last 24 months. I have to budget anywhere from an hour and a half minimum, just my humble opinion, to 3 hours, depending upon the ATS that's being used, because my resume never goes in the way it looks, never went in the way it was supposed to look. I'm having to craft and copy, cut, and paste to put it in so that it does, so that it actually halfway represents who I am, right? Not just a gobbledygook of text, right? It takes time to do that. And is the juice worth the squeeze? Of that, only to come find out that I've got 7 interviews that I got to go through, and the salary is not even half of what I need to be at to live.
Yeah, yeah. I think the best sneak peek into a company's culture is the interview experience that you're about to go through. And if
Preach
you're
it,
getting
brother, preach. Sorry, I don't mean to do that, but it's like I don't understand. I just got goosebumps
if
because of
you're
how
getting
much.
5 and 6 and 7 interviews, what that
Why?
says to me is nobody's empowered to make a decision.
No, no. And or you don't, not only are they not empowered to make a decision, you haven't put enough time in to think about the candidate experience and the process, back to your statement earlier, to ensure efficiency, because that's the most inefficient thing that you can do. And again, it speaks volumes. Like, how you treat the candidate is a good insight to how you're going to treat them. Wait a minute, when you get on board. So don't
Yeah.
you want to knock it out of the ballpark and make that everyone knows you only have how many seconds to make a great first impression?
Yeah, yeah. Look, recently I've been into final interview stages with a couple companies. They were 2 interviews. I was in front of the executives and decision makers right away. It didn't work out, but I respect those companies the most because I got to the decision maker fast. They gave good feedback. It
Yep.
happened quickly within a week or two. Great. I understand why the decision was made. No big deal. We move on. And if something comes up in the future, I'm going to be happy to take that call again.
Right.
There's 10 others that, I've had 1 interview here, 1 interview there, maybe not. Every week it slips by, it's a question mark in my head that if they do even come back, is this the company that I really want to be part of? Unless my job is to completely transform the TA organization and
Right.
fix
Right.
those things that I'm experiencing,
100%.
fine.
Yeah.
But it definitely changes the questions I'm going to ask the later stage interviews that I go through. So
Yeah. No, I think that's where we both share the same passion, that the whole the role of the organization. I don't care what industry or what business it is. Obviously, you want to be profitable. You're not going to be in business. Okay, we get that. Understand that, bar none. But you do that through the power of your people. And if it's the power of your people, your processes and your systems that are coming into play, you've got to give the equal investment, right, to do what needs to be done and not overdo it. And my humble opinion is there's too much shooting from the hip. We'll figure it out as we go. And my only question for anybody that's out there that's doing hiring: how well is that working for you? Are you getting the right people? Because and I know the cost of what I'll just call an ineffective hire or non-productive hire. You bring someone in, there could be other ramifications as far as cultural impact, team impact, retention impact. You do need to have some level of get it right And the more work, in my humble opinion, and my tip, and then anything else you want to share on the employer side before we kind of wrap her up here, is you need to do your homework when you're the employer and you're the hiring organization. You need to be ready to go. So when you post, you're not posting it and then praying you get through it, for lack of better description. So on the opposite, post and pray, right, of the candidate, but you know exactly explicitly, when do I need this person in the seat? Again, back to the process, back to the stages, communicating it, and then managing it effectively. And here's the piece that I'm an advocate for, and then we'll flip back to you on the last things on the employer. Organizations that are out there, in my humble opinion, you need to develop your hiring managers as strategic partners to whoever's doing the recruiting for them. You need to instill how to manage that, and then get support from their supervisor that if they're hiring someone, Mike, I've always said this before, manage your search or your search will manage you. You need to make your job search. If you need that person in that seat so badly, so desperately, you need that headcount, that FTE, that person to do the work, then make that search one of your top two priorities. Not because you have your day to day, but it needs to be the next most significant priority until you get the person in. And then you shift to their development. So other thoughts, other tips on the employer perspective you'd love to share, and maybe the balance between AI and your experience of using and doing it, because it's all over the board.
Yeah, look, I think AI is a big meaty topic that might be a part two that we can come back to. I think I think AI, there's great things that AI can do. I think we need to be realistic about what AI should do. And we also need to be realistic that every time we decide AI is going to play a part in what we do, there's a risk associated with that. And we need to talk about those risks. A risk of affecting a candidate experience, a risk of capturing notes that maybe a hiring manager who's not great at interviewing might ask a wrong question. There's legal topics in there.
Yeah. So I didn't mean my deer in headlights, because those scare me the most from not because they're just not experienced, Mike. It's not you're a good person or a bad. You just don't know and you're not aware. But those scared, I get the heebie-jeebies.
It's a risky conversation, and I don't know if we're having them at the same rate that we're saying use AI at all costs. Companies are spending a lot of money on AI, and the directive is figure out where to use it. We need to tout the use cases of where this is adding value, and maybe we're going a little too fast with some of those. I don't know. And then there's things like scheduling. We all know that AI can schedule, but we also know that we're dealing with people, and scheduling is a difficult task.
Yep.
There's unseen variables, and things change all the way up until that meeting happens, and AI is good until it's not. So, I think recognizing that maybe 80% AI solutions are okay, but what are the checks and balances within those systems to say when it doesn't work, you got to find it quick and you got to fix it quick, or else the hands-off approach that you think you've put in place is now going to cause a severe problem with experience to somebody somewhere down the line. So I think we can tackle the AI. But the final thing on the on the employer side that I want to leave everybody with is, look, this is something that I raise my flag all the time. Simplicity is a competitive advantage.
100%.
Cut back on all those things that you needed to do. There are 3 or 4 major touch points that you can really add value as a recruiter. There are 3 or 4 touch points that you really add value as a hiring manager. Make sure those recruiters are enabled to do those 3 or 4 touch points well. Make sure that they know how to engage people on a human level.
Yep.
And develop that relationship at whatever point you think is important for you as a company. It doesn't have to be all 1,000 applicants, but it needs to be before the offer comes out.
Yeah.
So at some point, the recruiter needs to be deliberate in their role and really make sure that those 2 and 3 simple touch points that they're doing are done super well.
No, I think that's huge, Mike. And I think it goes back to everything that you spoke about earlier, and the shared passion we have for managing the process, right? At the end of the day, you're hiring efficiency, it's tied directly to your process. And to your point, to echo, how well do those people who are responsible for managing the stages execute those stages of that process to get the right people on the bus and the right seat on the bus? Well, Mike, this has been an absolute pleasure. I always love chopping it up and talking shop. We could, both of us could most likely talk about this topic for a very, very long time, not only because the background that we both have, but just the genuine passion that I know that you have and exude, for just trying to align the outcomes, right? From the who to the process to the celebrations that you can have by truly getting people in the right seat and watching them, because that's the whole point of the hiring process. Put them in a seat to help them succeed and win. Right? People like to win. People like to win. So speaking of win, Mike, thank you for your time today. I greatly appreciate your presence here on the Clutch Podcast. If folks want to reach out to you, they want to connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
Please just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I accept everybody's invite. So, yep, that's the best location, and happy to have conversations, 15-minute catch-ups. Good friend of mine, Elmar, put coffee chats in my lingo, so I'm up for coffee chats all day long.
Yeah. No, absolutely, absolutely. And Mike, we greatly appreciate your time. We'll look forward to sharing this. If you're out there listening and you'd like to do that, make sure you reach out, get a hold of Mike, reach out to me. I'll build the bridge to Mike, however you want to do that. It works. It's that piece of that conversation that we've had, grow that network. That's why I put together the Clutch Podcast. That's why I'm trying to bring topics that help people think differently. Because again, that's where the shift happens.
Absolutely. So, Ron, before you sign out, let's give one shout out to Tracy Kearney. It's because of her 100%. That we're connected. We talk about the importance of a network, and I think that those who are great at networking have a true pay it forward mentality. Tracy embodies this 100%. So Tracy Kearney at Challenger Grand Christmas, thank you very much for all your support and for putting Ron and I together.
1,000 times over. I'm glad you thought about that, because every time I think about Tracy, you think about people in your circle and their superhuman powers, and she is, and I'm going to say it, she's an angel, she's a saint, she's whatever you want to give to that credit, because she genuinely cares about the success of others, and she'll do everything that she can to make sure that people are winning. And so when you've got someone like that in our camp, we're already winning. Absolutely. Well, Mike, thank you again. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for dialing into the latest episode and edition of the Clutch Podcast. You can learn more. Go out there. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you subscribe and follow along for more topics around the market, more topics around human development, organizational development are coming your way, because this is the Clutch Podcast, where shift happens. See ya.